Hello everyone. On today's video, we're going to be talking about a Mexican folk saint, that a lot of you have asked me to make a video about. So we'll be discussing La Santa Muerte, or Holy Death, or Saint Death, however you want to translate that. And on today's video, we're going to be talking about a number of things. I want to begin by talking about common misconceptions, rumors, and false beliefs about her. I want to discuss her indigenous roots, Catholicism, and how it influenced her current image. I want to talk about my personal experience working with her as a practitioner and give you guys some tips to work with her if you're feeling called to connect with her. So, La Santa Muerte, Saint Death, Holy Death, she is a female skeletal figure. She's depicted in a robe, carrying a scythe, and a number of other objects. As you can see right next to me, she is often wearing different color robes for different situations, different petitions. To give you some examples, when she's wearing the black robe, it's often for protection from enemies, baneful work, hexes. When she's wearing the white robe, it can be for healing, elevation, blessings, energetic cleansings, as well as protection. When we see her wearing a red robe, it's usually for love, relationships, passion, lust. And when we see gold, usually for money, for financial situations. And there's a number of other colors as well. We even have a Santa Muerte that has different colors, almost like a rainbow all throughout her robe. It's a multi-purpose Santa Muerte statue. So something to note here, something from personal experience, is that you don't need different statues for different petitions. These are just tools. These are ways to get your mind focused on certain things and certain outcomes. You don't need a certain color to have a certain outcome or certain ritual to work. It's just for those of us who like to have certain representations and visual props for our rituals and our spells. So something that I notice, something that a lot of my followers or people that I mentor often ask me is, I want to work with Santa Muerte, but I feel like if I ask her for something, she'll take someone that I love. There seems to be this very strange belief that if you work with her or if you ask her for something, her payments will be taking your mother, your daughter, your son, or maybe a pet as a way to pay off what you just paid, what you just asked for. And this is a completely false idea. As a practitioner that's been working with her for the past 20 plus years or so, that has never been the case for me. I don't know anyone who has had that occur for them, asking her something and then getting someone in their life taken from them. It's a rumor that I don't know how it was created or how it came to be, but there is nothing factual about it, nothing at all true about it. Another thing that people tend to ask me is, I'm afraid to work with her because if I connect with death, the personification of death, I'm inviting death into my life. I'm scared that I'll start facing death in my own life, or people in my community or in my family will start to face death. And here is another misconception, but I also want to talk about this a little bit further. When we think about the concept of death, yes, she is the image and personification of death, but death is already all around us. In our bodies, every single day, thousands of cells die and new ones are reborn. Death is within us, in our body. Death is happening not just in a literal sense, but in a cyclical, symbolic sense. Every minute that passes, every hour that passes, it's the death of 1 hour, 1 minute, the birth of another one. When the sun rises, it's the death of night, it's the birth of daytime. Death is happening in nature, plants, animals, so many things around us are dying and being rebirthed constantly. When we look at it from that point of view, it's impossible to invite something that's already here. It's already here in every aspect and fiber of our human experience. It's impossible to invite that or invite it even more. It's like saying, I'm going to invite air. There's already air. We are surrounded by oxygen. It's not possible if you think of it that way. So I hear that as well. And then I hear another very concerning misconception and rumor about her. People often say, I heard that she's the matron saint of criminals. She's the matron saint of drug dealers, of sex workers, drug addicts, people in gangs, etc. This is something that I want to clear up. It is a fact that people in these lifestyles or in these paths do venerate her. That is a fact. We're not going to deny that. But we have to understand why. La Santa Muerte is a deity that accepts everyone. She doesn't judge you if you have a certain lifestyle or if you live your life a certain way. She understands that sometimes we might end up in a certain path due to survival. She knows that we don't just wake up and say, I want to be a criminal. Oh, I want to kill, I want to steal, I want to be in prison. Like, no one does that if you think about it. People end up in these paths because of survival or because they have no choice. She understands that, and many times you will see on news reports, on Mexican news reports, that a gang member was pulled over and in their car they found necklaces or cards or images of her. Or there's been cases where people are, where the police raids a home and they see, kilos of drugs here and there, and then an altar to Santa Muerte. That is a fact. But 9 times out of 10, I would say that these people are connecting to her for protection, for a sense of guidance or safety in the work that they're doing. No one is reaching out to her and saying, help me be more of a criminal, help me be more of a terrible person. Many times, I would argue most of the time, these individuals are asking for protection for themselves or for their family. I can say just only from my personal experience when I work with people who are doing things that are not so mainstream. When they're on the illegal side of things, they are mostly just asking for protection or guidance or answers about what's the best thing to do in a certain situation. So I also want to talk about the concept of religion and Catholicism. If we look at Mexican society, someone who is involved in those types of jobs or those types of lifestyles, they'll enter a church and it's likely that they'll receive judgment or they're going to receive shame. There's this whole thing of you're going to hell, you have to repent, eternal damnation, etc., etc. When we think about that, you expose yourself to that narrative in a Catholic setting, but then you go to a Santa Muerte temple or you go to a community where she's venerated. I can guarantee and guess that you're not going to receive that in those spaces. So, going back to what I was saying, yes, people that live a life of crime often venerate her, but it's not the only type of people that venerate her. We have doctors, we have nurses, lawyers, celebrities, public figures, even politicians venerate La Santa Muerte all across Mexico. So many of us who are first, second, or third generation Mexican, we might work with her simply because she represents something that we haven't found in spirituality, or we haven't found in what was presented to us as religion or connection to the divine. Many of us might connect to her because she accepts everyone, but also takes special occasion to those of us who feel like we don't belong, those of us who feel like we're not on one side or the other. I can only speak for myself in the sense that growing up Mexican American, you don't really feel like you belong on one side of the border or the other. Not quite Mexican, not quite American, something in between. You often might feel like an outsider, like you don't quite fit into a certain box. And La Santa Muerte welcomes those people, the people that don't fit into a specific category. I've also noticed that she works really well with artists, with creative people, bohemian people, people that march to the beat of their own drum. So all this to say that she is not a matron saint to criminals. She is a matron saint to so many different types of people, so many different paths. But unfortunately, the media only highlights those darker aspects. Another thing that I've heard people tell me is that La Santa Muerte is the devil, or that she's satanic, or she's this evil force. And again, that is not true. I think darkness and evil are two very different concepts. There is some darkness there, but darkness isn't bad. It's not a negative concept. I think many people get really wrapped up in the image. We see a skeletal figure, we see a scythe, we see that it's a black veil or a black robe, and we immediately assume something bad is going on there, but it's all symbolic. I can assure all of you watching that there is nothing demonic, nothing satanic about her, but it's the imagery that can really be triggering for some people. And another thing that I've heard people say is that She is a Catholic figure, which is strange. It's a strange thing to claim, but people claim that she is a Catholic figure, and because of people's maybe religious trauma or negative associations with Catholicism, they don't want to work with anything Catholic. Which leads us to the next points, talking about who she is, how she came to be. Catholicism has contributed something to her current image, but it's not the entirety of who she is. So let's dive into that a little bit more. So, many people often wonder, where does she come from? It seems that lately, over the past 20 or 30 years, there's been more awareness about her or just more of a spotlight on her, but her image and who she is goes far back. I want to talk about what I know to be true. I just want to highlight that this is what I know to be true based off research, based off information I've directly received from her. So, La Santa Muerte as she is now is not who she was in the beginning. There are indigenous roots to who she is, as well as Catholic influence, but let's go to the very beginning, to the old days of the Mexica or the Aztecs before the Spanish arrived. So, the indigenous people of Mexico and what is now Mexico City, they believed in a number of gods. There was a concept of a land of the dead known as Mictlan. This is where newly departed souls would enter once they died. To enter this realm, there were two deities known as Mictlantecutli and Mictecasihuat. And this is the Lord and the Lady of the Dead. They are skeletal figures, as you can see in this image right here. And they were psychopomps. They would escort these souls into the land of the dead, and they served a purpose in the Aztec pantheon. But when we look at what happened when the Spanish arrived, the Spanish came with their Catholicism. They saw what the indigenous people of Mexico were doing, and they deemed it as demonic. They felt that they were worshiping false idols, that they were worshiping demons and dark deities. And their plan, as we all know, was to convert everyone forcefully. As an indigenous person in Mexico at that time, you had two choices: to convert to Catholicism or put up a fight, put up resistance, and eventually die. So many people converted, obviously, but some people decided to cling on to their religious beliefs through more sneaky ways. They used what's known as syncretism to keep their traditions alive, but in a more discreet way. So some of the indigenous people of Mexico realized that there were parallels between their gods and the Catholic saints. So when we look at the Aztec god Tlaloc, the god of rain, people began to notice that St. John the Baptist had a few similarities with him, so he was syncretized with that Catholic saint. We saw the god Huitzilopochtli, the god of war and the sun, was St. James. Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent, St. Thomas the Apostle. Then we saw Tonantzin as the Virgin, or later to be the Virgin of Guadalupe. Xochiquetzal became St. Mary Magdalene, and so on and so forth. But when we look at the Lord and the Lady of the Dead, we have two skeletal figures, and we look at the Catholic tradition. There is nothing quite like these two deities. There is nothing to match that energy quite like it. But when we think about non-saint related things, when we think about the deities that are not saints, we see that there is this concept of the angel of death or the Grim Reaper. It was the closest thing to them, and they decided to hide these two deities behind one deity. At the same time, if you think about it, venerating the angel of death isn't a very Catholic thing, if you think about it. Imagine being a Spaniard and seeing that they're lighting candles or giving offerings to the Grim Reaper. That's going to ring some bells. So the practice of venerating these deities and syncretizing them was very underground right from the beginning. Over time, what I feel to be true here is that over time, these three images melded and mixed and became one entirely different deity, a deity that represents the mixing of cultures, represents the mestizaje, the mixture of Spanish and indigenous cultures, and we have what is now La Santa Muerte. This is something that happens quite often when we look at, for example, the Roma people, these travelers that came from India that eventually started to settle around different parts of Europe. They have a saint known as Saint Sarah Kali, and there seems to be quite a bit of influence there from Hinduism. We see the goddess Kali, the black one, the dark one. She is also being given that name of the dark one. We see that in Ireland as well with Saint Bridget, who has pagan roots with the goddess Bridget. It happens in many different traditions and many different spaces and communities across the world. So, if you ask me, she is an entirely new deity in itself. She is the product of these mixing of cultures. Some practitioners like to believe that she is only Catholic, that she is the personification of God's angel of death. Some people say there is no Catholicism here, it's all indigenous, that she is the lady of the land of Mictlan. But my personal opinion is that it's both, and it's a new deity that's been birthed from these two concepts. So, personal experience, I want to share a few anecdotes, a few stories about my relationship with her. I want to start off by saying that I'm not the type of practitioner that reached out to her, that decided to connect with her to ask her for a favor and then start something from that point on. My story was a little bit different. I grew up in a household where we had quite a few alternative spiritual practices here and there. So me exploring these things was never really shamed. But um, what I noticed when I was around 12 or 13 years old is that I started to have dreams where La Santa Muerte was showing up. The really funny thing about her is that in my dreams, she was never the center of attention. She was just something in the background, or almost like an NPC, just a character that was not the main event in my dream. I remember the first dream I had of her, I was at a supermarket and I think I was with my family or I was with friends just shopping around. And in the background, Santa Muerte is just pushing her cart, buying produce, just minding her own business, doing her own thing. So that happened. And then I started to have dreams where maybe I'd be walking down the street and she just walked by us like a casual, everyday person, just minding her own business. I found it so funny and so interesting that it was so as a matter of fact. It was very like, oh, I'm just here. It's just minding my own business, nothing to see here, just going about my day. That sort of energy was always in my dreams. The more that I dreamt with her, though, the more actively involved she became. It got to the point where I'd have dreams, and then statues of her would fall out of bookshelves, or books with her image would just drop on my lap. I think there was even a dream where I opened the window and she was standing in the center of the street with her arms open, and she turns and looks at me and smiles. When it got to that place where she kept showing herself in a more obvious and direct way, I decided to start actually researching her. The thing is that when we look back on those times, the early 2000s, around 2005 or so, the internet didn't have much information about her. I would say there wasn't even any information about her. So one day, my aunt and I, my aunt who's a little bit witchy as well, she took me to a botanica, and I remember we went to one in particular in southern Arizona, and the owner of the store was this lady, and she was a practitioner. She had this huge statue in the center of the store, and everything that you could think of, statues and necklaces and flags and all sorts of paraphernalia with her image. It was all there. So I decided to buy a book. It was a very thin, I would say like 100, 150 page sort of book. I bought it. I asked the lady some questions and she was very nice. She gave me some pointers and she just told me what to expect, what to do, what not to do. Very kind advice from this lady. And from that point on, I started to venerate and honor her, just giving her weekly offerings, giving her the occasional copal incense or pastries or flowers, but just offerings with no expectation. It was always just a way to show respect. And I think about this a little bit because all those all that time spent venerating her, all the time spent connecting with her every so often, it kind of led to a point where I stopped regularly visiting her altar and giving her offerings, and almost shifting into a space where I would only connect with her through trance, through meditation, and it kind of went into that direction. Fast forward to now. Now, when it comes to Santa Muerte, I notice that she is the type of deity that whenever I'm struggling or whenever someone is trying to harm me or take advantage of me, she interferes. And she tends to make her presence known. She shows up, she helps, she moves things around in my life in a way that I kind of avoid unnecessary obstacles. I often, in my trance meditations every day, she often comes in, delivers messages, gives me guidance, and I'll still to this day see her sometimes in my dreams. But the really interesting thing about her is that whenever I've mentioned her name out loud, whenever I say La Santa Muerte in a conversation, things happen. I try to avoid talking about her or mentioning her name when it's not needed. I have one particular situation that I want to share. A friend of mine from Colombia was struggling, I think about a year and a half ago, struggling with her aunt. Her aunt was in the hospital in critical condition, and to my knowledge, this relative of hers was dealing with a health condition that was gradually just putting her in a vegetative state. I remember that it got to a point where her aunt just couldn't move, couldn't talk, couldn't do much of anything, but she wasn't transitioning to the next, to the other side. She seemed to have just been like stuck and holding on, but it was causing the family a burden. It was causing a lot of stress and worry. And I remember one time we got on a Zoom call, and my friend asked me, "Is there anything we could do? Is there any ritual or any sort of work or spell that we could do to help my aunt let go and transition to the other side? I see that she's struggling. I see that she's in a lot of pain, and she's just a shell of a person. I want her to find peace." And I remember I said, "Well, we can talk to La Santa Muerte." And my friend got kind of scared because she's not very familiar with her. And she kind of said, "Oh, I'm not sure about that. I don't want to go there just yet. Let's think about it and we'll see." So she kind of backpedaled. And I said, "Not a problem, but just a suggestion. It was nothing to really get into there." Cut to the next day. I wake up in the morning to a text of my friend saying, "My aunt just died." And when I read that message, I just thought of Santa Muerte. I just thought it was her. It was absolutely her. So I believe that in that situation, she heard me and she said, "I got this. Don't worry about it." And she decided to help her aunts cross to the other side. There have been other situations. I want to share one more anecdote. One situation with an ex-friend, a person who was kind of a shit starter, someone who liked to gossip and just start rumors. He was someone that I always had at arm's length, someone that I knew him as an acquaintance more than anything. But one day he invited me and three of my friends to a housewarming party. So we go and we have a good time and we're drinking and we're not really engaging too deeply with him, but just enjoying ourselves. And I remember that at one point in the party, he asked me about my spirituality. He asked me about my social media and seeing images of like a skeletal figure. I said, "That's Santa Muerte, and she does this, and she works this way." And he was really interested and engaged. Anyway, we changed the topic of conversation. Hours later, this friend started to get really drunk, really wasted, just a very messy type of drunk. And I noticed his personality changing dramatically. He went from being a little bit of a gossiper to a full-on angry person. He started to insult me, started to call me all these names. Just I could see him becoming very violent out of nowhere. From that point on, I realized this guy's not for me. This guy's not friend material. This is all the information I needed to know that we don't need to hang out again. So then the next morning, I remember in our group chat, he sent a message saying that he woke up to this large sliding door window in his living room collapsed and shattered all over the place. Like it just for some reason fell in. I come to think about how does that happen? A sliding door, a glass window just suddenly unhinging itself and crashing and breaking everywhere. That's a little bit strange. So that happens, and then I distanced myself from him. I started to hear from the grapevine that he was rushing himself to the emergency room every so often because of some sort of health scare that he had. And the doctors apparently couldn't find anything, but he felt there was something going on in his body. Apparently, he had a little bit of a mental breakdown. He ended up leaving the country for a while. He came back, and then when he came back, gradually he began to be isolated by our group, by our community. Everyone started to disconnect, avoid him, ignore him, and we haven't heard from him since. I have no idea what happened to him, but I come to think what went on here is too coincidental. It seems too uh, it just seems like too much of a coincidence for me to not think that maybe it was her. So for me, I never ask her for anything. I've never had to petition her or do any rituals to get anything from her. She's just someone that acts and swoops in and gets things done without me having to ask. So it's very strange, but I'm happy. I welcome it. It's much appreciated, and every so often I do a trance meditation practice. I go into a deep state of trance and I call her in. We have conversations, and she has a very motherly energy, very modern mother energy, at least for me. Very protective, very loving, but very much I guess like she will crack the whip if she needs to. She's not going to deal with bullshit. She's not going to let you believe false ideas and go into states of delusion. She will try to always keep you grounded and in touch with reality. So for all of you wondering, how do I start working with Santa Muerte? How do I get to connect with her and start a functioning relationship with her? Gradually begin a relationship with her, and I know this might go against other people's suggestions, but I would never approach her asking for something right from the start. Don't approach her if you've never approached her just with a, hey, I want this, get it to me, and I'll pay you this much. I don't recommend that. What I would recommend is that you see any connection with La Santa Muerte as you starting a relationship with a deity. If that's not something you want to do, then maybe she's not the deity for you to be connecting with. There are plenty of other deities and plenty of other folk saints that will help you on a one-off type of way. But I highly recommend that you invest in starting a relationship with her. What does that look like? What it looks like is having a space somewhere in your house, maybe in your room, a small table, maybe even a small sitting stool, bar stool. Anything works, a windowsill even. Have a space for her somewhere where you offer her a 7-day candle, incense, preferably copal, and for starters, just that. Let's not get too crazy here, but just for starters, those two things. And when you're in this space with these offerings, just tell her who you are, introduce yourself, explain why you want to work with her, talk to her about your day, how things are going, what's on your minds, the things that you're struggling with, the things that you're enjoying about your life, everything. Just speak to her like you would a family member or a friend. So what I would recommend is that you make this a weekly practice. Once a week, refresh those offerings. If you want, you can start adding more things. You could add a cup of coffee or a glass of wine, a shot of tequila. She loves tequila. You can add other offerings that she often accepts. And I've noticed that she is really fond of the following offerings. She likes pastries, especially Mexican pastries, pan dulce. She loves chocolate, of course. She loves flowers. I've noticed people get wrapped up in what kind of flowers. You could find expensive roses for her if you wish, but if you go into a garden and start picking out flowers that you find to be beautiful and you give them to her, that will be even more appreciated, I would say. You can make her gifts. You can make her a card. You can draw her, make a drawing or a painting of her. You can sing to her. Anything that comes from the heart is a great offering to give to the Santa Muerte. I think anything that grabs your attention or makes you even think, oh, this would be a great gift for a mother, some perfume, some jewelry, that is also good. I think the thing with Santa Muerte is that she's a type of deity that isn't 100% strict about her offerings. We have different deities that will only accept certain things, and if you give them something else, it'll be taken as an insult or it'll be rejected. With her, not so much. I think it's more of the intention when it comes to offerings with her. So I want to give that suggestion, and working with Santa Muerte is a relationship. It's something that you will be practicing every so often. It's not something for a one-off thing, a one-off chance. Keep that in mind. When working with Santa Muerte, the only thing that I recommend is to always approach her with respect. It goes without saying that we don't want to pull a fast one on her. We don't want to be fooling her. We absolutely don't want to be making promises and then not following through. That is probably the worst thing that you could do. Everything will be okay as long as you follow up on your promise. If you don't, anything can happen. That's something to keep in mind. This is what I would recommend, but I know that there's so many more questions regarding the work involved with Santa Muerte. There's only so much that we can cover on a video, but I would recommend anyone who's curious or anyone who felt that I didn't clarify or answer any questions on this video to leave a comment below, and I'll get to you as soon as I can. If you would like more personalized support, or if you have more specific questions, feel free to reach out to me on Instagram. You'll see it on my description below the video. And I would encourage you all to give me a like, give me a follow, and tune in for more weekly content. I'm going to be making more videos about spiritual topics, about folk saints, about emotional healing, so stay tuned. I hope this video helped, and I hope that it answered questions. And until next week, take care and have a good one.